And thanks everybody for being here. This is our last, what we call LeVCAP meeting as part of our PCOR award. And I just want to sort of go over the where we started, where we've been. I'm going to use, first, actually, thank you. I can't begin to tell you how many things we learned from doing all this. And I hope it really will echo throughout the years. Is a strengthening event for the whole, our Rare Bone Disease Alliance concept. I'm going to work from the original aims from the award we wrote, simply because that helps me keep my brain straight. We wanted, so aim one was to achieve wider sustained PCOR participation among patients, caregivers, clinicians, researchers. And we discovered we were full of it. The Rare Bone Disease Alliance members are all over it. You're really not a rare bone disease advocacy group unless you are patient-centered. We also learned how strong our members are and how innovative they are and how many great ideas they have. And we recognize that we were taking too much of a Mother Hubbard approach, and that in fact, we must start inviting our member organizations to play a much bigger role in organizing events going forward. We learned that everybody on this has a tremendous amount going on with great ideas. And we probably had too many meetings at the beginning, too many meetings overall, but we do hope that we can continue to go forward with probably quarterly meetings, loosely based on our startup meetings, during which members can share their new innovations and concerns. And this will be particularly important for our smaller, ultra-rare groups who sometimes don't have the financial wherewithal to do some of the great stuff that some of the organizations are doing, but maybe they can copy it just a little bit and leverage it. We certainly hope that all of the member organizations will use the now over 1,000 names that we have in the TeleEcho email list to encourage educational meeting attendance. And I say that very emphatically. You know, it would be fabulous if all of our patients could get to centers of excellence. But even when I want to send people from where I live in DC to Baltimore or to DuPont, they can't get there. One of the big questions is always, how do we be sure that people get good quality care close to home? Okay, come on. We wanted to increase engagement with underrepresented communities. And I think overall, that was one of our downfalls. We haven't been as good about that or as successful at that as we really inspired to be. However, at our final meeting, the Tin Soldiers presentation was just an incredible inspiration in terms of finding patients who are troubled and don't have access to care. And I think it will be an incredible lantern for us going forward. Engage stakeholders who may be disadvantaged by the digital divide. Well, most of the other organizations didn't think this was a problem at all. This mostly seems to be an OIF problem. I think you've challenged us and incentivized us to work harder on this issue. And we, from the OIF, are working on a project, in fact, to be sure that we are reaching the people who want and need to be reached. Ensure that all summary reports and documents are openly accessible and available. on the RBDA website. Well, you know, when we started, there was hardly anything on the RBDA website. And now we have a tremendous amount of content, thanks to our large group meetings. And of course, we've had the growing experience of the tele-echos, so that if somebody sort of came up with the idea, oh, I want to search on rare bone disease, not that I know what the heck I'm looking for, they can really spend a lot of time on our site and hopefully be truly engaged and hopefully reach out to organizations that would be meaningful for them. Last but not least, and hopefully the thing we can discuss for a few minutes now, is how do we develop a roadmap to sustain what we've got going here? We've learned the wonders of Zoom. We've also learned that it's not quite as good as being in person, but it's way better than not having connectiveness. Again, I feel very strongly that there's huge overlap in clinicians, that if you're interested in one rare disease, bone disease, you're probably interested in about 10 more. And it's no joke to be lifting all the boats. I had a unique experience a few weeks ago where I learned a patient that I had seen 15 years ago turned out to have FOP. And I got multiple consults. Nobody picked it up. It took years for us to recognize, or someone else, wasn't me. I think lifting all the boats, ensuring that as many clinicians as possible know as much as possible about the spectrum of rare disease or rare bone diseases is how we overall improve patient care. So again, it is my great hope that now Melissa, who's going to be leading us, will aim for a quarterly meeting, because everybody has so much to share. I hope everyone will feel that they have the right to use our tele-echo email list. And clearly, we want to share in seeking out opportunities to draw attention to rare bone disease and support all our members, and certainly find those organizations that would benefit from being members. So again, thank you. But those are my reflections on the award, and what we did, and the things that I'm going to put into our final report. Thank you. And I would really love some feedback from everybody who's now on this call. Don't stay on the sidelines.
Well, I'm never shy.
Oh, go ahead, Deb. Go ahead.
I'll speak up. I think that everything I heard from all the other groups along this, past year where we've been on this journey just reinforces what you were saying, Dr. Tosi, about, the needs of the community and the things that we do really well. And, I know one of the things I hate doing in advocacy is reinventing the wheel. So I think the more that we can work together to, shore up some of these things like the centers of excellence, we've been working quite a bit on that, trying to figure out, what's that right mix in terms of validating and creating these centers where patients can get care. And, it's hard because even NORD has come up with a model of centers of excellence for rare diseases, and that doesn't align with kind of what we know for our patients in terms of what's working for rare diseases. So I think, at least for hypophosphatasia, and I think that a lot of the investments that we've made in the consulting, of some experts in this space could be leveraged with the rest of the group in terms of what our findings are. And potentially we could come together to solve some of the issues that we hear are barriers to creating some of those centers from doing some of our soft sounding. So, again, everything you're saying is totally resonating with me in terms of your final report. And I think that that's part of creating that roadmap moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Deb, with everything that you said. And I also, it's interesting you brought up NORD. And I think this past year really highlighted for me just how different we are in terms of what NORD and Genetic Alliance and, Global Gene, some of those other kind of umbrella organizations think we are. And so, it's great that we have those relationships, but I think we shouldn't be afraid to say, no, our needs are different. And, as a group, I think we're stronger saying that. It's just my reflection.
We'd love some more feedback.
So I'll go. I've really appreciated the opportunity, to participate in this process, and like many of you, I've learned a great deal from the members of this group and the participants of this group. So thank you. I really appreciate that. I think from my perspective, in hearing that you have an email list of over 1,000 individuals for teleecho. I think that it really offers the opportunity, I think, for at least from a science perspective, to think about overlaps in our diseases. And one of the ways in order to sort of generate that interest and to generate those ideas, I think it's important for the scientists that are often siloed in their own disease world to be introduced to, be introduced to other scientific presentations around bone diseases and other, in other forums. So for me, I would love to engage the teleecho group in some of our research networks that we have and seminar series that we have, particularly around bone disease. That, and again, unlike many around the table, the bone phenotype is part of the overall phenotype, but it's not not always the predominant phenotype or the predominant problem with our patients. But again, bone disease in our diseases is really, a concern for our patients. And I think that will be a major focus for us moving forward from a research perspective, really trying to understand why it is that, lymphatics in bone causes bone destruction, sometimes in a very rapid manner and sometimes in a very episodic manner. So I think engaging researchers in a broader spectrum of bone disease, I think will help us better understand what's going on in our diseases.
I would speak to that too a little bit. It hurts my feelings sometimes when members of the Rare Bone Disease Alliance don't include me and, hey, we're giving a program on this. Hey, we're giving a program on that. And it is my hope that going forward, that, if you're having a one-day program on anything, that you let us send it out to the teleecho, that it's got to be a back and forth. The clinicians, we have mostly clinicians on the teleecho, you have mostly scientists, but if they're not talking to each other, then it automatically means that everybody's 2 to 3 years behind. And this is just an easy thing. And good old Michael, at the beginning of every teleecho, we try to advertise anything and everything that's going on to educate in the rare disease field. And we really hope that everybody has a sense of ownership.
I'd like to also add there to what Mike said. I think that was really great. I think there's power in us coming together, and I wondered if there was a way, like if we were like, I know the ASMBR does quite a bit of that, but as from patient organizations, if we were to come together in terms of a bone, conference where, Combined Brain does that, right? They have, I believe it's almost, I was just talking to Terry and she said they have close to 130 different diseases related to the brain, and they're working on a consortium. And they have a consortium, and what they're doing is sort of mapping endpoints between the different diseases. And they got a grant as a result of that from the FDA, where they're building outcome assessment that's more generic and as a starting point. And the FDA is beginning to take that into consideration as a good step. So I wondered if we have enough bone champions here that if we were to be able to put something together where we could bring scientists together to talk about, where could we see these overlaps, and they could sort of focus on, where are we seeing these overlaps, like Mike said, not from a scientific, I'm not saying we want another ASMBR, but I want our patient voice to be heard in terms of what are we looking for and how can scientists hear that, because those are always very eye-opening to them, right? They're working in their silos in their clinic and they're not thinking about it until they come to they chance upon, like Dr. Tusi, you said, you chanced upon an FOP patient. So how can we make those more meaningful overlaps? Just a thought.
Now, Nina, it's a good thought, and it might even be, starting with our scientific advisory panel and our membership, that we bring everyone together and,
Yes.
kind of have that sort of think tank approach before we, do something really big. But I agree with you. But we have 26 of the leading experts,
Yes, we
on our
do.
panel.
Like we're probably sitting on a gold mine.
Yes, we are.
we,
Yeah.
we just need to channel some energy into it. And I really like the idea of also having, inviting some of our startup people, like, like Ethan Polstein and people like that, to just visit with that, come as observers. And, they have such great insight into how they can take a small molecule, or they have, other ideas, but really get these folks into one room to be able to sort of orchestrate some real mastermind discussion around how can we, and I'm sure people like that would jump on it, and we'd be able to sort of trigger some movement, at least in rare bone.
And I think we could definitely get funding for that too, that type of meeting, from either pharma or somebody would fund us.
I'll just say it was invaluable to me to hear the experiences of different organizations and their journey, things that were similar, things that were very different. And just thinking how helpful it is, even at this point, we've been around for quite a while, but even when, everybody's constantly learning and figuring this out. And most of us are in this, not because this is our field, but because we're learning it for whatever reason that we're connected to the disease. And so we're learning on the job all the time. And I think hearing from Deb saying she hates reinventing the wheel, and that so resonates with me, because I know we reinvented the wheel 1,000 times on this journey in ways that we probably didn't have to, but we didn't know any better. And I think I would love to see some way for us to open up, have more communication among our organizations, so that the newer organizations and the more experienced organizations can have an ongoing discussion with each other and pose questions to each other. One example is Deb was invaluable to us for our first virtual conference in helping us find someone to produce the conference for us. We didn't feel capable of doing it. We knew we weren't capable of doing it. And she steered us in a direction to work with someone that they had worked with. It was just not someone we would have found on our own, and it was invaluable to us And that kind of thing, I think we can all lend a hand to each other for things that we've learned going forward. So that's just one thought in terms of what we do with these groups that we now have the contact among each other.
Kathleen, can I ask? Kathleen, did you record your conference?
Only parts of it. We had to get permission from people, and
Yeah.
some people do and some people don't. And so we do have some of it, yes.
From a sharing standpoint, we would love to have that conference on the RBDA website.
Oh.
That people might not necessarily find you, but they might find us. They might find us, back and forth.
Yeah.
But I think, tying people together is the thing, and that we would be grateful beyond words for any of the things that you feel everybody on the call can share to make that the best website that there ever was. And we recognize that you can't always share everything. So as you know, when we do the teleechos, we only have the didactic and we don't have the cases because of HIPAA, of privacy. But it's still, oh my gosh, lush, absolutely lush.
Yeah.
Some of those presentations.
And let me look into that, and I would be happy to share that. Assuming that the people, and I think if they've given us permission to post, it will be fine. What we did is we did individual sections for each one, and we posted them individually because some people are adverse to having themselves recorded or posted. But I think it's a very good idea. The farther, it's to all of our benefit, the farther and wider we disseminate this, the better it is.
If we can have sections within the website and refer people directly to your website, but there's a real chance they might start with the RBDA.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's a very good suggestion. Thank you. I'll mention one other really interesting thing to us that came as the patients and the board members of when we did this virtual conference. We had a discussion group with the full panel of speakers and all of the patients. A lot of it was separate, but we just brought everybody together for a discussion group. And somebody started asking questions about the personal experience of the patients for what helped them. And things that we all just knew, like that heat is very helpful, stretching is very helpful. The doctors who've been studying this for quite a while, a number of them went, really? We didn't know that. That's really helpful for us to know. And we all were just so surprised. It makes you realize there are things that they're not aware of that we just assume that they are. And we said, well, we're actually doing a patient questionnaire. And they were like, oh, would you share it with us? We would love to have that information. Well, that was just so eye-opening for a lot of us to see, there's a lot of input, practical on-the-ground input that patients have that we assume that the doctors working on it know, and they don't necessarily do that. It's rare. So how would they have that overview? I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but it was an eye-opening experience at that discussion group for a lot of us on that point. So I just throw that out there in terms of making sure that whatever the details are of your disease, that you make sure that the people that are working on it have the benefit of that input.
Here.
And just a huge thank you to you, Dr. Tosti, and to everybody involved in putting this on. It was really a wonderful opportunity for all of us, and a huge thank you. Obviously, it was a huge amount of work on your end, and so we appreciate it.
Great fun, though.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, well, I don't want to back us up. I think, Michael, you're on deck next.
Sure, yeah, let me share my screen very quickly. And all right, does everyone see my title slide? I see it's shaking heads, so I think that's good, or not nodding heads rather. So for those who don't know, my name is Michael Stewart. I'm the Director of Education here at the OI Foundation. And I want to talk about today, and actually the conversation we were just having is the perfect transition to talking about the major themes from the listening sessions that we conducted as part of this PCOR award. And I think we're going to see lots of commonalities between the different things that I'm going to be discussing. I'm going to try to keep this very relatively short, so I apologize if I speak a little bit quickly, but I want to get through all of this. So just real quickly on the process of how we conducted these listening sessions. So me and my colleague, Stacy, who should be on the call here with us this evening, we conducted 4 listening sessions in total, 2 with patient groups, 1 with stakeholders, meaning like other professionals in the rare bone disease advocacy space, and then 1 with clinicians. Once we conducted all of those listening sessions where we are asking open-ended questions to them, we were then recording their answers and trying to find major themes or doing a thematic analysis of what they were saying to find commonalities and major trends. And then also all of that information and any quotes I used throughout today and any reporting are de-identified. So we try to remove any identifying information from that. Real quickly, so we had 3 big domains, or like kind of 3 big buckets that are questions we're trying to address. And those domains are domain 1 is patient identified issues that need to be reflected in the development of patient reported outcomes, barriers and facilitators to accessing care, and then barriers and facilitators to participating in research projects. And so I'm going to just go now talk about the major takeaways from each of these 3 domains. So domain 1, almost everyone we talked to talked about the need for needing more open and honest communication with patients. So that means all 4 of those groups said essentially that main point. Also, nearly everyone talked about the experience of pain needing to be more central in those discussions, whether it be talking about treatment or just venting about the psychological aspect of pain. And another thing that many of the patient groups particularly talked about was a lack of adult care options. And this is both in terms of in their immediate geography, so like they can't get to one in less than a day's travel, or there is perceived just very few available, period, in the world or in their country. And so feeling like they just don't have even the people they could hypothetically travel to. Another thing that I found very interesting was, so some of our questions in this domain are about, how do you define quality of life for a person with a rare bone disease? And how do you measure that? Or how do you what are the good questions to ask to measure that quality of life and those changes you have? And when we asked this question, lots of people in the patient groups could give their own subjective answers. We're only looking for subjective personal opinions to all of our questions. And then essentially every stakeholder and every clinician gave some version of an answer of that is a subjective question and we cannot answer it. And I just thought that was interesting. I don't think it necessarily reveals a good or bad thing. I just find it interesting that this is a huge question, and people were hesitant or professionals were hesitant to give one answer that may exclude others. So I'm just going to go over some quotes we have, particularly relating to quality of life definitions. So one was quality of life would mean pretty much it's a measurement of daily living and tasks and things that I'm able to do in my life. Another person said, I would see quality of life as a pain measurement system. Then a third person said, for myself, being able to do things that I wasn't able to do before, maybe now in a modified way, but also hopefully without pain. So the quality of life for me would be like plugging through, they said, but hopefully I won't hurt as much today as I did yesterday. Now I want to talk about the second domain, so accessing care. So real quick, many people we talked about the need for coordinated multidisciplinary care, and that as being seen as the ideal care model or the gold standard. However, patients, even when talking about this ideal model, which many of them said the pediatric world practices much more often, they saw it as even that could be exhausting in many circumstances because there is stress around coordinating, or this is now for the adults talking about themselves, stress around coordinating your own care, remembering your own files, past procedures, past surgeries or treatments, and having be the one to be the conduit going from doctor to doctor or specialist to specialist. So even in that world, that like this coordinated multidisciplinary system is stressful. So I think it's kind of interesting that everyone saw multidisciplinary as, you know, like, oh, having seeing multiple specialists at once, treating you as a whole person and not just as one thing was very helpful. But then who coordinated that care was kind of up for debate or seen as in question, whether it be the patient themselves or other people. Another thing people talked about, so facilitators for accessing better care, things that encourage people to get better care. So people talked about if their care provider was more willing to learn from the patient themselves and ask open, honest questions, that was seen as an indicator that they would receive better care. And this is more in a realistic scenario, understanding that they may not be able to see a quote unquote expert in their condition, but if they felt that they could meet a doctor who could ask questions and learn from the patient, they felt that was better than them not asking questions. Another thing we saw was that many people talked about telemedicine is a relatively, a more used tool now or an option, but it is not an ideal way for many people to get their health care. And most people saw this, it was not as a compromise. This would not be their first choice for receiving care. Now I want to talk about barriers to accessing better care. People talked about travel, financial burden. So rare disease doesn't know geography, but unfortunately insurance does. I thought that was a very apt quote. People talked about the potential trauma around the diagnosis experience and how that can hinder future care seeking. And again, a lack of adult care options. Real quick, I want to go over some quotes, and I know I'm running out of time. I know more about my disease than some of the doctors I see, but that's okay. That's how it is. But if they're willing to learn, that's super helpful. Another, it would be nice to not have constantly be an advocate for yourself. Yes, it's important, but it'd also be nice for them to say, hey, we know how to handle this. Another one saying, and again, it's like that holistic look at it, because yes, the surgeon will want to do surgery. I was suggested surgery so many times in my adult life. And so I just realized at some point, I was like, oh yeah, I'm seeing a surgeon. They're going to tell me they need to do surgery on me. Kind of, if you are a hammer, everything is more likely to look like a nail. And then finally, getting a diagnosis can be so traumatic that can establish resentment towards the medical system. And we have to rebuild that in our care. And this is a medical professional saying that last quote. Finally, I want to go over this last slide, participating in research. Facilitators, things that help people participate in research. We saw a strong connection between the more connected you are to a patient advocacy organization, so all of you, the more connected people are, the more likely they are to know about research. We found that the people leading patient advocacy groups knew the most about research. And then when we talked to, say their hypothetical board members, they knew a lot, but maybe slightly less. And then when we talked to maybe an engaged volunteer, they knew slightly less. When we talked to a less engaged volunteer, they knew the least. Also, we saw for the people seeing the benefits in research, everyone talked about altruistic and personal benefits to participating in research. So I want to help the greater good, but also maybe I'm getting access to a new treatment. If it's, say, a drug trial, I might be getting access to a new treatment, hypothetically, that others would have to wait longer for. And people saw both as valid reasons. And barriers, travel and transportation, again, the criteria for studies being too narrow. This may not be addressable, but I thought it was worth noting. And then people talked about certain studies just have more interest from the patient populations than others. And again, thinking about if the ones with a little bit more potential personal benefit, like say drug studies, rather than say natural histories, which is less intervention related. And then finally, just a slide real quick about some reflections. We had a relatively small sample size. perceived lack of diversity in the group, a small community with lack of real anonymity. It's because we're a small community. I knew many of the people that we were talking about. So even though we said, oh, these answers are anonymous, we understand if people don't necessarily trust me when they say that. I totally understand. And then time constraints. And so with that being said, I just want to thank you all, and I am happy to answer any questions you have.
Michael, I had a quick question. You said in the clinician group, they were hesitant to talk about quality of life. Was it just like, because I don't have the disorder, I'm not going to talk, or was it more like,
yeah,
what was the vibe?
Yeah, so I thought it was, you know, I can't go too much into detail because the pool of people we could have interviewed was relatively small. So, but essentially it was, oh, this is a big question. I want to respect the question and how hard it is, and therefore I'm going to say this is subjective and hard for me to answer. And it was, I just found it noteworthy that all the clinicians we talked to, and I believe all of the stakeholders we talked to, said a version of that. Meanwhile, the individuals with rare bone disease we talked to gave some type of subjective experience, which is what we were asking for. We were asking for subjective definitions. And I just thought that was noteworthy, that quality of life is a huge concern and also hard to define at the same time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just working in the healthcare industry, that's kind of like a no-no in terms of words that we use to describe clinical outcomes. It's really diving further into what are those translations of what quality of life means to a patient with the condition. So like, Michael, what I thought you said about the pain, quality of life almost is like a pain scale. You know, that's something I think that we can really come together as a group to define, especially when it comes to bone, because I can't tell you how many patients, you know, we talk to who endure pain, and pain is such a touchy subject because of the opioid, you know, issues that are happening, and, you know, better defining that, better quantifying that, getting better data about when we're seeing improvement in pain when it comes to new therapies that are out there, because we know that we're seeing patients with less pain, but the companies don't even want to touch that as a potential indication or something they're looking at. It's important that we figure that out in order to make sure we're really, you know, capturing the true impact to patients and that quality of life piece.
Yeah, that's an incredible statement. And I was really not aware that was pharma's perspective. Because in OI, again, pain is a very big deal. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, at least from my perspective, more in the adults who did not have the advantage of getting the rotting and the bisphosphonates and whatnot that we give children now. Mm-hmm. And you know, to hear an adult say I had 200 fractures by the time I was 10 just takes my breath away. I'm upset if my kids have one fracture a year. Yeah, you know, it's a very different world now. But circling back, you know, we are dealing with the fact that the FDA right now only uses fractures as a measure of drug efficacy, and we have been very interested in pain and mitigation of pain as a more realistic goal, but you're saying no.
Well, I think it's defining what we mean by, it's not that pain is just so multifaceted, and it's multi-systemic in nature. So, I mean, we even have had webinars on how, you know, mental health can manifest as pain, you know, and you know, so I think it's very, I mean, if you look at the number of companies that describe themselves now as companies that specialize in pain, they don't talk about that anymore. They've all diversified their messaging in terms of a corporate message, because opioids just have become so taboo, and pain is such a dicey topic. And every time we talk about pain, we try to get, I can't tell you how many pain groups I've tried to reach out to say, can you come talk to our patients? They're like, no, we can't talk to patients about pain. I'm like, can I get somebody to talk about pain? You know, it's really very frustrating. And I think, you know, defining what that pain is, helping I always, it's one of the biggest issues that we have with our adult patient population in hypophosphatasia, because their major complaint is pain. They don't have the fractures. They don't have many times the bone manifestations. They've got the pain. And so we've got to figure out what that is. Otherwise, we're leaving out a huge portion of the patients that we represent.
And Deb, I agree with that. I think that, from our standpoint as well, pain is probably the predominant symptom that we have in patients with bone disease, and even without fractures. And we don't understand that. I mean, from a biology perspective. So again, I think the more information that we can develop as a group that really highlights and details the type of pain that patients with these disorders are experiencing, I think that will help inform our researchers as far as what are the potential mechanisms which may actually lead to much better therapies than currently exist.
Yeah, and then you have this other component where, there's that relationship where, the way that the medical community looks at things, orthopedics and, rheumatology is joint. And I think this whole area of musculoskeletal, right? The connection of the muscle with the pain is, we have so many patients who have spasms and, issues with their muscles. And that's not even like, we don't even touch that with, specialists, and who's looking at that. And we're just now starting in hypophosphatasia to look at some of that, where nerves, nerves is a piece of that. How are we bringing neurological and muscle and all these groups together so we can stop, even I always say, like, dang it, why do we call ourselves soft bones? Because it's so much more than bones, right? It's soft bones and all of these other things, and educating people about that. Yes, bones is a hallmark of the disease, but it's just a part of everything that's impacted by this metabolic disorder.
And I think you just have a new name for your organization. So much more than bones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
The soft bones and more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Such important discussions, really.
Yeah, thank you. Again, just so we stay on time, the next issue is our, whoops, I of course lost it on my, the engagement checklist is something you all helped us with. And I would consider it a personal favor. We now have a much shortened version. If really at the end of this event, we'll send it out. If you just fill it out quickly, frankly, it's just part of the award and I need to get the work done. And it would be a personal favor. It's so clear that everybody is so engaged. That's really not the issue. It's we want to look good so we can get another award. We're all in that boat. We've really done a lot of discussion and feedback. Is there anything we haven't touched on? And before we go on to the good Melissa?
Dr. Tosi, just to go back to what Deb was saying about the pain issue and what Mike was saying. So the OIF has put together a global consortium with other OI organizations around the world, and OIFE, which is the European umbrella organization. And I'm wondering if, Erica, I'm looking at you because you're really leading this on our behalf, if we should invite other people to come in, because we have clinicians and researchers or whatever talking about this issue and about pain in OI specifically. But what I keep asking is, what is the statement? What are we trying to solve? Are we trying to, because they're talking about all kinds of surveys that come up with pain scales and whatnot. And I think we know the problem that people experience pain, but what are our action steps? And I'm not sure we're there.
I we had a really big insight that was like an aha moment for me, even just a few months ago, is that, patients who have HPP, and I'm sure it's the same with OI, their threshold for pain is so different from ours that they endure a level of pain that they don't even talk to their doctors about, because that's just the norm for them.
Mhm.
And I had a conversation with my son just the other day, and he was talking about golf. He's like, yeah, it hurts when I'm walking, playing 9 holes of golf, but it hurts for everyone who walks, right? And I looked at him, I was like, not everybody. And he was like, really? It doesn't hurt when you walk? He assumes that's right. And we had this market research study that Alexion had shared with us about a woman who had basically gotten rid of the stairs in her house because going up and down the stairs was too painful. But she didn't tell her doctor that she was in pain. She just happened to, yeah, everything's fine. I got rid of stairs because they were too painful for me. But, then they realized that, she wasn't even articulating the pain to her doctor. And that's a whole nother issue, that the patients aren't even aware of the pain that they're having.
I think when pain is your default, like my son says that all the time, he's 13, he says, when the doctor asks him all the time, how is your level of pain? So he says, what does 0 look like? And because he doesn't know.
Right.
So it's even hard for him to gauge on a pain scale. He can just tell you what it was yesterday, and he can tell you what it is today. And that's kind of where we go.
It's so interesting to hear this, because it's the same thing that we hear from melorhistosis patients and from the NIH study. The absolute number one thing for patients is the pain issue. And talking about the conferences, it's the bane of our existence every single conference.
Yeah.
Who can we get to speak about pain at our conference? And we go everywhere trying to get someone to speak.
We do the same thing, Kathleen, and we never hit the mark either.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't yet anyway. We're still working on it. But
Yeah,
I think
the same
Tracy,
with us.
Sorry, Tracy, back to your point, like when we do talk about it, what is the action step? So I guess, I'm going back to how my kids think, telling you, what are you going to do about it? So, I like that we're having this discussion, but again, Tracy, to your point, what's the tangible outcome? Like, what are we hoping to achieve? Right. We can probably deal with pain on a psychosocial level, right? In terms of how do you deal with pain? But what are we hoping to gain, or how do we take that information and make it an actionable step? I think that's where we lose patients, right? Because, okay, now what? I've told you my pain is 9, or I'm telling you I'm in pain all the time. Okay, what are we going to do with that information? It's really a hard thing.
Yep. Yeah, to have some sort of report. Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's make a statement, let's say, at least start there or something.
We're in pain.
I guess it's just a bigger discussion for another meeting, but I think it's something we're all dealing with.
And it might be frankly, the topic for a combined meeting. And I'm sitting here as an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm only happy when there's pain in one spot, because then I know that's where I need to go to fix it. And yet you're absolutely right on. So many patients have pain all over, and nothing in my education, nothing will help me help them.
And Dr. Tosi, I think that brings up a good point too of, is a valid goal to say, in an ideal world, we want patients with rare bone diseases to experience 0 pain. I don't know if that's necessarily either realistic or even like the proper goal in an ideal world of treatments. I know I keep thinking back to Deb, because you're bringing up about, how like the opiate crisis impacts this discussion at large, right? Like so much of that was, oh, we have this magic pill that can take away all of your pain. And lo and behold, after actually doing research on it, there are consequences. But at the same time, also, like, I don't have a puritanical sense of like, well, pain makes you strong. We need to experience it.
No. I would argue that we want people to be able to do their day.
Yes.
And not feel that they have to step aside. That's a simple, realistic goal.
Yeah, pain interference, like that's the whole, yes. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to
No,
take us down.
I'm
there too
glad
much.
you expanded that. All right, and we're going to keep this on time. So Melissa, next steps.
Yes, I can be very quick. I've been loving all the chat about Slack. I will look into creating a Slack group for everybody. I think from my understanding, it's just an app you have to download, and then we would invite to join the group, similar to like a WhatsApp or probably like a Teams group. So I will work on that for everyone. The other thing, as Dr. Tosi mentioned, we would love to keep meeting quarterly, not necessarily to talk about PCORI or PCOR, but this kind of collaboration, where we all can talk about what is going on in our groups and discuss and talk amongst ourselves. What typically is a good time of day of the week for everybody? We all have different schedules and needs and availability, but I'd love to get the most people on as possible. So love to hear from you guys what is best for you. Oh, people need a training. Okay. We'll look into options. But yeah, so let me know, please, what's best for you guys as far as timing goes for like a quarterly meeting.
Should you send a note out to everybody, Melissa, because we don't have everybody here?
I
and then
will,
we
yeah,
can get
yeah.
back
I
to
will
you.
definitely send a note out to everyone, but keep that in mind. And then finally, I just wanted to give you guys like a quick heads up of what we have coming down the pike this fall for the RBDA. We'll be at ASBMR at the pre-meeting. Michelle Davis will be speaking about the patient voice as far as FOP, and Dr. Rauch and Tracy are leading that pre-meeting. There's a poster session, so that will be really exciting. And then we are working with the American Society of Human Genetics, and we'll be hosting an ancillary meeting at their annual meeting this year in LA. And we tapped Dr. Sandesh Nagamani from Baylor and Dr. Carlos Ferreira from NIH to co-chair this meeting, and they've put together a really, really great program. They have Dr. Brendan Lee as their keynote, and then they have 4 20-minute talks. Allison Boyce speaking about fibrous dysplasia, Julie Hoover Fong about achondroplasia, Priya Kishnani about hypophosphatasia, and Eric Amal about XLH. So we have 2 adult, 2 pediatric disorder cases, and I think it'll be really exciting. So we're looking at Tuesday, October 25th, which is the day that the meeting starts, to host the ancillary meeting, ideally in the evening. So kind of keep that on your radar. We'd love to have people attend. And we are looking at hosting a booth in their exhibit hall. ASHG has offered to give us a very lovely reduced rate to host a booth. And as we keep talking about the clinicians and the overlap, I think it would be a great potential to bring some new clinicians into the fold, some geneticists.
Well, so we also have, just a reminder, we have free meeting registrations for ASBMR for anyone who wants them. So just let me know. And as soon as I get the link from ASBMR, I'll just send it to you so you can register, and they'll do your code and everything.
And I think last but not least, if you are aware of meetings that we should go to, what I think we really sort of hooked ourselves to ASBMR for so many years, but in fact, that is a limited group when it comes to lifting all the boats and making sure that a patient with a rare disease faces a clinician who might know something about their disorder. And so we're really looking to move on out and be present probably more at the Endocrine Society, et cetera, over the years. And this is a big jump forward. And please be sure to alert us regarding where you think we need to be. All right, I give you back 2 minutes. And please please, please, please fill out all of our stuff. And we just can't thank you enough for participating.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
everyone.
Dr. Tosi. Thank you, Tracy and everybody.
Yeah.
Take
Thank you
care.
all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.